Joe, what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, I don't know. I hope we'll be able to we'll fill some time.
I really don't actually know very much about your backstory.
I don't know much about yours either, so I'm they probably do, but I don't. So
no, I've spent 40 years hiding it.
Well, you got to tell me how you do that.
As soon as they find out, they'll realize I've been a fraud all this time. Why did you become a rabbi?
Well, that's an interesting thing because I wanted to actually hear about your story with regards to that because I'm assuming, and I could be assuming wrongly, that you wanted to be a rabbi. Am I wrong about that?
Absolutely wrong.
It's wrong?
Yeah.
So we share that in common.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, you grew up, you're an FFB, aren't you?
Yeah, well, you could say that, yes.
FFB means from birth.
Yeah.
From birth.
So I grew up in Los Angeles. My family originates, depending on how far back you go, from Syria, from Aleppo. They were in Aleppo for 500 years after they left Spain. So my family on both sides are Syrian. My mother's side, my father's side, their mothers and father's sides, they're Syrian all the way back you can go.
What language did you speak at home?
English. But
hang
a little bit of Spanish.
Just a moment, hang on a second.
Yeah.
You mean American?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I can say yes, American, because when I came, I don't know about you, how you felt about it, but when I arrived, I had to learn the language because it wasn't the same.
Churchill very famously once said about the United Kingdom and America, two nations divided by a common language.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. I mean, I think that the divide is getting smaller, but especially, when so much of one's career is in speaking. Mark Twain said, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. And that is true, because when you miss the nuances of how people hear words, it makes a very, very big difference. So I definitely had to learn the language when I came.
And so you went to Jewish day school, you grew up in a Dati home, it was Shomer Shabbat.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
So I was in Jewish day school for all of primary, all of high school. And after high school, I very much wanted to go to yeshiva. But I wanted to go to a Sephardi yeshiva, which is easier said than done.
In those days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even in these days, it's better these days, but in those days, it was very difficult to find an authentic Sephardic yeshiva. And
because a lot of Sephardi boys went to Ashkenazi yeshivot, and they landed up learning to speak Yiddish.
Well, if they were lucky.
Yes.
But it was more just a question. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because my father studied with, thank you very much.
Okay.
So my father had studied with some pretty serious Sephardi Rabbanim, and I felt kind of gypped out of the, being in LA, not having an opportunity to do that. So I wanted to go and study in the tradition of my father and my grandfather and my family. And I really was almost, at a loss with regards to that. And the reason I wanted to learn was because I loved Torah, always, from the time that I was young, that I did love very much. And I wanted to be able to know it for myself. I wanted to be able to be in that space. So thankfully, it happened that Rabbi Joseph Zatzal, who we knew, he used to stay with my grandfather when he visited Los Angeles. My grandfather was the president of our community at the time. And so I grew up seeing him, in and out of LA. And I was enamored, because, sunglasses and the whole robe and the gold. This is like the coolest guy. For me, anyway. So thankfully, he opened a yeshiva the year that I wanted to go to yeshiva. And
in Israel?
In Yerushalayim. It was called Hazon Vadia, but it was an all-Israeli yeshiva. My Hebrew was a decent working Hebrew of an American kid who went through Jewish day school for 12 years, which was not bad, which we can maybe talk about that later, about Jewish day schools in Hebrew language. But it was by no means enough to be able to kind of run in an Israeli yeshiva and learn Gemara on the level that they were learning it in Halakha and so on. So it was sink or swim. I made it work, and I ended up spending 2 years there learning with Rabbi Vadia. And he, in the time, because it was a new yeshiva, He was giving shiur once a week. His son, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, who was the former Rishon Zion, was the Rosh Yeshiva. I basically learned there and directly from them for 2 years. So,
and after all of that, you still didn't want to be a rabbi?
I absolutely did not want to be a rabbi.
They put you off good and proper.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of went in with that in mind. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit of I did things that didn't help me not be a rabbi, unfortunately. So, you know, I did end up marrying Margalit. Most of the people here probably know Margalit. I don't know if everybody does. My wife, Margalit, who's Rabbi Ovadiah's granddaughter. And Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, who's my Rosh Yeshiva, he was the Shadchan. And he said, look, I have a girl I want you to meet. And, you know, I said, I'm 20 years old. I'm not interested in getting married yet. He goes, no, come meet her. And I spoke to my mother, and my mother said, well, what do you lose? If you like her, wonderful. If you don't, so then you don't. Go meet her. Which is interesting because, you know, I look at my kids and other kids at 20 years old, and I realize, well, they're quite young. But that's what I did. And we met, and we got married. So she was very excited because she came from a rabbinic family and did not want to marry a rabbi. And so she married me knowing that I wasn't interested in becoming a rabbi. So that didn't work out for her. But, you know, to cut the story, you know, to get to the point of the story, what ended up happening is that we moved back to Los Angeles. I continued to learn in Kollel for part of the day in Los Angeles for another 3 years. I was then invited to New York by another one of my teachers, Rabbi Shimon Aluf, who was opening a rabbinic college in the Syrian community in New York. And that is a proper Syrian community. I mean, we're talking maybe 70,000, you know, people in the community. And their goal was to open a kollel to pay the fellows that were learning in the kollel in order to give back to the community. So they were recognizing that a lot of they were not having anybody go into the rabbinate in the community. They were all going into business. So they thought, let's pay them equivalent salaries of what they would be making in their first years of business, and ask them to give 3 years back to the community. And if after that they want to go back into work, then they can go back to work. And that's what they did. So they recruited me. And I moved to New York just to study, really. That's the only reason I moved to New York. And that was wonderful. And I did it ended up being another 7 years of learning there, right? And the first year that I arrived, one of my cousins came to me and said, look, there's a small shul that's opening. Would you be interested in being chazan for that shul? I said, well, it's a little bit of extra money on the side. Why not? You know, it helps a young family and whatnot. So I took the job, and they had been through 4 rabbis in 4 years, this shul. And the rabbi...
A bit like the conservative government here.
Very, very much like the conservative government here. The rabbi that was there when I had arrived, also, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur came. I went back to LA to help with the family. I came back, he was gone. And I said, what happened to the rabbi? He said he refused to say the prayer for the state of Israel at the opening of the Hechal, so it didn't work out. I said, okay. They said, will you fill in for him? I said, I will fill in for him, but I do not want to be a rabbi. You are going to need to find somebody to replace me just for a few weeks. And they said, yeah, just start. And it took them 15 years to find somebody to...
It's remarkable that at this point, really, our stories, which start in such completely different places, actually come together pretty much at this point of your story. So let me pick up the other side. I grew up to an immigrant family in South Africa. My father had come at the age of 17 from Lithuania. My mother was just the age of 1. It was a warm, traditional Jewish home, not Shomer Shabbat, no learning.
See, even that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
So no Jewish books, nothing of that kind. In 1968, a young Chabad rabbi comes to South Africa from London, and I'm at Lindy and I at university, and we go to listen to him, and it's a real turn on. He's just terrific. And he says to me, well, what are your plans for December? That's our summer holidays in South Africa. I say, well, actually, I've got it all planned out. I'm buying a 500cc Harley Davidson motorbike and sidecar, and I'm traveling around Europe. He says, nah, you don't want to do that. He says, there's this groovy place called Kfar Chabad. Anyway, I go off to yeshiva for 3 months, and I'm totally hooked.
Right.
And that starts me on the path. Then I come back to South Africa. You just don't see anybody walking around in South Africa in those days with yarmulke, with tzitzit, etc. You're just a complete and total freak.
Mm-hmm.
It's as far as our parents are concerned, my parents, her parents, I've been caught up in a cult. Nobody walks around looking
the Harley
like
Davidson.
That. Yeah. Yeah, I made the wrong choice in the end.
Right.
I could have been a biker, and it would have been a much easier life.
I'm much more interested in that.
Yeah.
Goodness.
So I'll end up going to yeshiva for a very short time, just about a year, and then it's the Baal Teshuvah period. It's just the beginning of the Baal Teshuvah movement. It's just after 67. Mm-hmm. There isn't any place for. You haven't had the phenomenon of a Baal Teshuvah person getting married, so there's no kind of facilities for them. So you go into the regular kind of kollel. You're learning with people who've been...
General population.
No, people have been learning all their lives, and you're just a beginner. You haven't got the language. It's a complete disaster and everything else. Anyway, I get advice from the Lubavitcher Rebbe to continue to finish smicha, and I'm working here part-time for the Lubavitch Foundation while I'm studying smicha, working as a university counselor. And I qualify and become a rabbi. It's taken me a heck of a long time. It's been a very long journey.
No, wait, you just skipped over something over there. When did you decide to qualify and become a rabbi? Is it just because you just kept learning?
What happened was after I'd spent...
Double click on that.
No, after I'd spent 2 years studying in the kollel in Kfar Chabad, we consulted with the Rebbe, and his advice was I should take my studies to their logical conclusion. Okay. Which I understood to mean you should take smicha, you should become a rabbi, which I did here in London. All right. So now I got smicha.
You did it here?
But yeah, Eitz Chaim in Golders Green, Rabbi Ortman. My chevruta was Jonathan Sachs. We studied together. We took our exams together, and he passed, and I passed.
Were you sitting next to each other? Or yeah.
And I then get an invitation from the Lubavitch Foundation to work for them full time, and that's a big deal. It's my dream. It's a dream job. Yeah, never imagined it could happen. It's very exciting, and this is early 1970s. So I go to the Rebbe to ask for his blessing, and Rabbi Vogel, who passed away a year ago, is there as well. He was the executive director of the Lubavitch Foundation. And I go into the personal interview with the Rebbe, which was a tremendous privilege. And I say to him, I've had an invitation from the Lubavitch Foundation, to work, full-time for them, and I'd like to ask for, your blessing. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is a slam dunk, isn't it? I mean, I want to join.
Rubber stamp.
I want to join his team. There's no question about it. And he looks at me with his incredible, piercing blue eyes that look right deep into you. It's very uncanny. It's a very extraordinary experience, not replicated with any other human being I've ever encountered. You're almost like mesmerized by it. It's like your soul has been opened. And he says to me, you will find the fulfillment of your Yiddishkeit in business.
Well, plot twist.
So I walk out, and Rabbi Vogel says, "No?" I said, "Sorry, mate, I'm going into business." So I went into business.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of why the Rebbe might have said that to you? Or is that just, do we not go there? I'm curious.
I had no idea at the time.
Mm-hmm. And looking back?
In retrospect, I realize the intense perceptiveness and wisdom of the man, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So I am walking down to my little shul down the road from my home in Hampstead suburb one Shabbat, and a very good friend who davens there is walking in the opposite direction, and I say to him, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to this place called South Hampstead, and it is the off-roof of a friend of ours. Why don't you come with?" So I turn on my heel, fatefully, and I arrive in the old shul over here in 1984, I think it was. And it turned out to be the last Shabbat of the previous incumbent, because he too had not been prepared to say something about the state of Israel or something like that. So it was kind of like,
Wow.
okay. And at the Kiddush, the person whose offer it was introduces me to Cecil White, of blessed memory, who was there, and the president. And there's a young man, a young Chabad man, who's due to take this position over here, but he's just got married and he wants to spend a year in Kollel studying. So they're looking just for a fill-in. Okay? This is where the stories begin to come together. Okay? And she says to Cecil, "Why don't you ask Shlomo to be the rabbi here?" So he says to me, "Would you like to be the rabbi here?" I said, "Yeah, okay." But I'm in business and it's not a full-time job and it's only temporary. It's just for a year. Yeah. 40 years later. Took them that long to find a replacement.
Yeah.
Now you
So
ask,
the lesson is never take the job if you really don't want to be a rabbi.
So you walk into this place 40 years ago, the old shul on the site, and there's just a few older people kind of shuffling around, basically waiting to die, I think. And there's no one to talk to, except for the fact that it's Big Bang. You have heard about Big Bang here? Not the one that started the world.
I'm assuming you don't mean the beginning of the universe.
No, I don't. I mean, commercially, when Margaret Thatcher changes everything and sets the banks free and creates an explosion of activity, really hyped up, and suddenly there are masses of young people moving into this area here, adjacent to the city. And they're beginning to walk into the shul. And I'm finding that I have a language to speak to them,
Right.
because I'm in their world,
Right. Yeah.
because I'm in business.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
No,
You see,
it's not planned.
Joe, it's a funny thing. I always say there are some people who are straight arrows. You see it amongst our children as well. From day one, they know exactly who they are and what they want to be. There are other people who spend a long time in their lives discovering what their destiny is. And you think that you're traveling down one path, only to discover that that's not actually where your destiny lies.
Yeah.
So in your head, you think, no, I don't want to be a rabbi.
Right.
I don't want all of that kind of stuff. And then you discover that the Almighty has directed your footsteps and has led you into a place, and you look back and you connect all the dots, dot to dot to dot. And you recognize, as it happens in all of our lives, you realize that nothing happens actually by chance, and that we're directed to our places. And when you get there, you have no option other than to be the kind of person that you were destined to be. So you had to become a rabbi.
Well, I couldn't agree more. First, I would say that bit of it, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is guiding, it's a very difficult thing to explain. You either experience it and know it, or you don't. And you can see it when other people say it, if you know it. So I do appreciate that very much, and I absolutely feel that. I will also say that I kind of accepted the rabbi thing a few months ago, really. I finally have stopped fighting, but only recently. And it is true. You know, I think that there's an important, because it's not, I don't know how you feel about it, it's not a clean sale. there's a great tumult along the way, right? That molds, I won't say you, I'll say me. It molds, right? So there is a lot of nisayon, I suppose we can say, right? A lot of challenge, a lot of elements that come out in which one is honed, molded. And
but we are molded by our communities. They're the ones who mold us.
They have a hand in it. They definitely have a hand in it. There's no question.
I think they have more than a hand in it because we're just responding. We're responding to what we hear is wanted, and that is going to shape us. But I want to come back to the being able to say this is the finger of God, directing my life. I think you need to be a certain age before you can really look back and see a stretch of time and to be able to look at your life and to be able to see the step by step. When you're young, you just can't see it. It comes with, I don't know how old you have to be. I don't think you have to be 78. I think you can do it before you get to my age. But you do need to be able to have a big hinterland to be able to look back on.
I think that's true. I think it's always better to have a bigger past to look back on. But I'm not sure that you have to be so old. I might disagree a little bit with that because it's possible to be, maybe it's because I moved a lot in my life, right? Literally moved places a lot in my life and had to make very significant decisions. I wasn't just kind of continuing in a certain place. And in those things, I believe and I feel that you see very much a trajectory. You see very much how things are moving and what it is that you need to do next and what it is that's incumbent upon you, what is calling you, to be able to move forward.
So when you...
I absolutely agree that it's helpful to have more years because you have more data, right? You have more points that you can draw lines to. But I'm not so sure that one needs to be even in midlife in order to be able to do that. I think that it helps. I think there's a difference between that and discovering who I am. But there's a clarity, I think, that a person can see if they wish to, of the line of life and how things are moving.
Yeah. And this is not about rabbis. This is about everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
It's everyone.
I agree.
Yeah. So when you found yourself being a rabbi,
yes,
what did
it's
you?
an interesting way to put it.
What did you want to do? What was your aspiration? What did you think your role was?
That's a really good question because I think that it's been a point of what's the word? I wouldn't say necessarily criticism, but it's been a point of perhaps a question of alignment or what's necessary. I have always seen myself primarily as a teacher, student teacher. I have not primarily seen myself as a pastor. And people who know me will know that. They will know. If they hear about Rabbi Joseph Dweck, pastoral is not the first thing that they will put under the qualities, right? I would like to believe that over the years I have gotten better at that. But I will say, even before I was a rabbi, and I saw other rabbis, I would think, how do they do this? I look at you and I think, how do you do this? I don't know how it is that people are able to. There's something about the ability to just embrace everyone around them in that way. My way of embrace, and something that I've come to understand, my pastoral offerings are in teaching and in listening and in perspective. And so I can say, as I'm sure you will have experienced in your many, many years, I will sit with somebody and hear about their life and hear about the struggles. My predecessor, Rabbi Levi, he used to say, I'm unshockable. And I say the same. And I'm sure you will say the same. I think at this point, we're unshockable. We've heard practically everything. So for me, it's the teaching. It's the sharing of thought. It's the sharing of inspiration. It's the sharing of perspective. It's the sharing of ideas that we do need in our lives. And that for me is what I offer and what I believe, I have, the bracha for me is to be able to give. That of course includes, pastoral elements to it, and I do that, and I honestly have to say that the great honor of my life is to have been included in the lives of people, in their smachot, in their sad occasions, in their celebrations, in their losses,
Indeed,
that to me is I cherish that.
Yeah.
But that's what
I think my pathway was different to yours, Joe.
Yeah.
I didn't have your background of learning. I didn't have those years and years in yeshiva, and the exposure to those great people. What I did have was chassidut, and some inspirational, deep teachers, very deep, who touched me very deeply, and formed me. But when I then found myself being the rabbi here, I don't think I ever saw myself as a teacher. I think what happened was, it was instinctive. It wasn't something that was planned or strategized. But I kind of instinctively felt in the United Synagogue of those days, with all of its great formality, with the big parade down to the Ark to take out the Torah, and the parade back with the Geboim standing in their proper places, and everybody taking the rights.
We still do that.
The rights. Yeah, I know. That's why I would not have lasted for a minute in your operation. And
But we digress.
Yeah, but I think it was really about just breaking down. They always had this thing, kavod harav. The rabbi's got to be, sits up somewhere over there, and it's got to be separate. You've got to give him honor, and and everything else. And I didn't feel that about myself at all. I just felt that I was just a regular guy who'd actually become inspired by some very deep stuff that had touched me, and I just wanted to break down the barriers.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, feel that we're just together. Don't put me on a pedestal. Don't make me different. Call me by my first name. Don't do the big rabbi shtick and everything else, because that's not who I am. It's not where I'm coming from. So I think the pathway around over here, which is still something, the impriture of South Hampstead, was a certain kind of informality, a certain kind of interaction, a certain kind of connectedness, a certain kind of warmth, a sense of just creating community around you. You use the word embracing. It's really interesting. In the whole Kiruv movement, the Lubavitcher Rebbe never used the word Kiruv. Kiruv means I am high and you are low, and I need to draw you to my level to become like me over here. And there's a better word. It was called hafotza. Hafotza means to burst out. If you've got something inside you and you are excited and you're energized and you radiate it out, then people will look at that and say, hey, that's terrific, and I want to be part of this. But there's no sense whatsoever that I am higher and you are lower, or that we're different, or that I have more learning than you have, and therefore I need to have more kavod than you have, etc. You don't have to stand up for me. We can do this together. We can create an environment around us. It was an entirely different track.
Yeah.
And it was actually against the background of all the stuff,
formality.
Which was the formality that was out there. And you began to notice that people were becoming more informal in themselves. We had become a more informal society. People were no longer going to work in suits and ties, and there were Fridays off and etc. So if all of that is happening outside over there, and then you come into synagogue and suddenly it's super duper formal, there's a mismatch. You're just not touching people in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, because for me, I'm an American, right? I don't know if you tell, but I'm an American. And for me, in general, America was never that formal. I think part of the breakaway shul that America was to, the UK, was to break away from the formalities in a very significant way. So I think that there's something about that, right, which speaks to me. And maybe when we talk, I think we want to talk a little bit about our experience of Anglo Jewry. We can talk about that maybe next. But I think what you're saying about the hierarchy, I agree, because when I was a young rabbi, I found myself placed there when I never thought, I can share that. I've never thought that way either. I'm up here and you're down there. But I felt very objectified as a young rabbi, because I felt people came into synagogue and it was the Sefer Torah and the bima and the rabbi, almost like I was part of the fixture of the. So we give great kavod, but you're not one of us. And my best relationships and my best engagement and my best teaching was when that was not there, when people allowed for there to just be in a sharing and interacting. There's a story that the Gemara tells about David HaMelech, in which Shaul HaMelech, when he would give shir, he would sit up on a thing, like this, and everybody would sit down. And when David HaMelech became king, he said, I sit on the floor and everybody sits on the floor, or I sit on a chair and everybody sits on the chair. But we can't teach and share in Torah if there's going to be these kinds of barriers and hierarchies. So I appreciate that, and I think that that's absolutely true. And I have to say, what I found when I came here, besides all of the structure, which I think is a big part of Anglo Jewry, British Jewry, people call me by my first name. Nobody ever would call me by my first name in New York. And I so appreciated people calling me by my first name, because it didn't diminish any of the mutual respect, but I didn't feel objectified anymore. I felt like I was part of the people. And so that happened here.
You see, a person doesn't earn respect because of an office.
No.
You earn respect because of who you are.
I always say, if a person has to keep saying, I am so-and-so, they're in trouble. Right?
Joe, what have you learned about Anglo Jewry in the 11 years you've been here?
Well, I adore British Jewry. I adore the community at large. To start with, I really do, and it has a very, very special place in my heart, which is why after we make aliyah, it's very important. I really, really do want to come back at least.
Why?
3 or 4 times
What does this community have that you didn't find in other places?
The first time that I come back, I'll be scholar in residence here.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
I'm very, very excited about that. Because also South Hampstead has a very, very special and warm place in my heart. I adore this congregation. I love you, Rabbi Shlomo Levin. I've always just felt so warm and at home here, and that's thanks to you and the family and the broader family. So I mean, for me, I love it. It's quirky. It's illustrious at the same time. It has an unbelievable history. I mean, for me, my own personal community, the Spanish and Portuguese, it's been the great honor of my life to serve. I mean, to me, it is not a small thing that this community, my congregation, my community, has survived over 3.5 centuries in this country.
What have you learned from this community?
I've learned many things from this community. It's hard to be able to put it succinctly. I mean, I've learned that people have interesting, really serious and deep connections to Masoret. I'll explain what I mean by that. Masoret is, what is the tradition? What is the tradition of the family? What is the tradition of the community? What is the tradition of Jewry? That I don't find as much in the United States, because the United States is kind of a free-for-all. But in this country, it's almost as though everybody is inhabiting this grand hall of British Jewry. And everybody's part of it. That's why, has everybody seen the mural on the JW3 of the outside? I love that, not because I'm at the bottom of it. I love the mural because it's such an artistic depiction of this world that is British Jewry, which you could never really do that in America. You would always be leaving something out.
It's really interesting, Joe. I'm teaching the JLI course. It's a brilliant course. It's authored in America. And it is so interesting to see that when they want to touch on something like, I don't know, Hanukkah or Shabbat or something like that, they need to actually explain in some detail what it is. So they won't take for granted that the audience will know what Shabbat candles are. They'll have to explain, well, on Shabbat we have this thing called candles and we light them on Friday night. And when I'm talking to an audience here,
everybody knows what everybody knows.
You wouldn't even dream of having to explain those things.
So that's the remarkable thing.
That's the tradition
that's
that
exactly
you're talking
what
about.
I'm saying. That's very special here.
Yeah.
It's not everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not everywhere. That's one thing.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is there is a very strong structure to British Jewry. I think there are positives to that, and I think that there are not such positives to that. The positives are that I'll use shchita, for example, right? So part of my job is overseeing, my predecessor, Rav Meldula. I don't know if anybody's been to the Montefiore Hall in Lauderdale Road. So there's a photo of a gentleman, clean-shaven, tricorn, looks a little bit like George Washington. That's my predecessor, Meldula, who was an immense Talmid Hacham. And he wrote a very, very well-known sefer amongst rabbis called Chupat Chatanim on the laws of Nidah. And there is on the day of his death at the Velhos, at the Novo Cemetery, there's Hasidim that come from all over just to mark his yahrzeit. In any case, he is the founder of the Board of Shechita. The S&P is at the founding of most of the major organizations, in British Jewry. But Shechita, for example, I will say, and I believe this very strongly, the Shechita in this country is second to none in its meticulous execution, essentially. And I mean that in a much broader sense than the execution of. I realized when I said that was the wrong word. It's meticulous. It's excellent. And part of the reason why it is, right, and what I mean by that is when you see meat labeled at your butcher, you can absolutely know that it is precisely what it is that it says it is.
You know that a number of years ago, I was invited to officiate at the wedding of my niece, who lives in Portland, Oregon. And I asked around, I hadn't officiated in America previously, and so I started making inquiries, and I said, well, who's the rabbinic authority that I speak to about preparing the ketubah, and having checked all the names and giving me a form with all the information that I need, already prepared so that I can write the ketubah, etc. And where's the copy of the ketubah kept? And they said, no. You just rock up. You write a ketubah. You write a ketubah,
exactly.
And you give it to the couple, and that's it. And I'm thinking to myself, my goodness me. Before I'm able to officiate at a marriage in the United Synagogue, I have to have a certificate from the chief rabbi's authorization certificate. And the couple have already been to the Beth Din. They've already shown their status. Yeah. The Beth Din, the marriage officer has taken all the details and has prepared for me, the rabbi, the name of the place and the proper writing, etc. Everything which I need to fill in the ketubah. And I know that there'll be the ketubah, there'll be a copy ketubah kept in our safe over here, and there'll be another copy lodged at the United Synagogue, and you can go back 150, 160 years, you can find out when somebody was married.
Yeah.
And you do not have that kind of structure in America.
And to me, as an American, that is a beautiful thing. Yeah. Because as structured and kind of systemized as it sounds, it's really a beautiful thing. I'll tell you, actually, you talk about ketubot in a vault. I'll mention the story in a moment, but that is good. I think it's beautiful, and I think that it really lends itself to...
So where are the negatives?
So, well, I want to say this story because it's a very interesting one. So when I first came, I was standing at weddings, and I saw the rabbis filling the ketubah. And they filled it out in a way that I was not pleased with. It wasn't halachic. In my opinion, it wasn't halachically appropriate. And I said, you're doing this, it needs to change. And they said, this is our minhag. I said, minhag? It's a halacha mefuresh in Shulchan Aruch, right? You're not allowed to write this. I said, I want to see the archives. Now imagine, in America that would be unthinkable, right? What archives, right? Maybe the rabbi kept it, maybe he didn't keep it. I went to the archives, and I found ketubot from our community from 1740. Signed by Chacham David Nieto, who was one of the great Chachamim of Britain, one of the first rabbi of Bebes Mark Synagogue, 1701, and I found a ketubah signed by him in 1740, precisely as I had wanted the ketubot to be filled in. I said, that's your minhag. This was right. So that's Anglo Jewry, right? That's British Jewry.
So now tell me the downsides.
So I think that you started to outline it. I mean, look, the beauty of structure also can be its problems. Structure does not move well. It is not adept It is not nimble. And as you were saying, there is an element of responsiveness that is essential to living and thriving. And if we are encumbered in our capacity to nimbly respond to the circumstances that present themselves to us, because the one thing that is constant on this planet is change. It doesn't stop. It constantly moves into change.
So Joe, what would you want to change?
What would I want to change?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about specifics. I don't think that it's
Why?
important, because they are specific. They're specific. They're specific. All right? I think that there's an importance in being able to recognize, like you say, the people that were coming in, the young people that were coming into the synagogue, needed to hear something different, needed to experience something different. The procession or parade, as you say, from the Sefer Torah back to the Sefer Torah just wouldn't work for them.
I think...
So, I'm not avoiding it. Yeah, I'm not avoiding the question. I genuinely...
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
But you see, Joe, the problem that we then begin to encounter is there are some things that you can change very easily because you're not changing anything that's fundamental. You're just changing stylistically.
Yeah, I'm not talking about those.
Stylistically.
Yeah, we're not changing the curtains.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking about, the atmosphere in a shul, it's informality, it's formality. These are things which don't really impinge very much on halachic matters. The pressures then actually move on to those areas where people are looking for, because we need to respond to around us, are looking for changes, in a mechitza, for example, or in participation of a woman in the service in some small or less significant or more significant way. If we are operating within an orthodox framework, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how far do we stretch it before it stops being orthodox?
Yes.
What's the point? Where's the barrier? Where's the fence?
Right.
That if you then cross that, you are in another territory.
I think that I hear that, and I agree that it's a halachic question, but it's also, it requires a bit of foresight. It's a much more complex, in my opinion, it is a much more complex question than simply is this mutar or asur, because one also has to recognize what the ripple effects will be by any change in any decision. So we can bring rayas from the Gemara about how important change is, and we can bring rayas from the Gemara about how dangerous change is. And we have to be able to know the difference as to what are good changes and what are not, and sometimes we might make mistakes. What I would say is sometimes the risks are worth taking, because the rigid insistence on what we do and why we do is itself potentially lethal. Because you'll know the story, of course, the very famous story about, when Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, you fast forward the story all the way to the end, that there was a sacrifice sent by Caesar to be put up on the altar because he had heard intelligence that the Jews were thinking to rebel against him. And the terrible individual who brought the sacrifice on behalf of Caesar to Jerusalem maimed the sacrifice so that the Jews would really be in trouble. He was not a stellar guy. And that was brought to the rabbis, and the rabbis said, particularly Rav Zechariah ben Avkulis, said, well, I mean, if we put this animal up on the altar, people will say that we can put blemished animals up on the altar. And if we don't put him up and we kill this guy so that the word never gets back to Caesar, which was entertained by the rabbis, they'll say that a person who makes a blemish on an animal is a death penalty. And in the end, they didn't do either, and Caesar destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. And Rabbi Yochanan, that's the moral of the story. That's the only place in the entire story where Rabbi Yochanan, who tells the story, interrupts the story. And he says, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis destroyed our Beit HaMikdash. Because the one variable he did not entertain was, what if there's no Beit HaMikdash? You can talk about the blemish, the not blemish, what's going to happen, what if there's no Beit HaMikdash? That wasn't entertained. And I think that to cut through That's the issue. Sometimes we don't entertain. We can talk about, are we going to change this or are we going to change that? Are we going to do this? What if there's not an entity to be there to talk about the changes? That's a problem. And
so do you think, when you're talking about structure, is it then useful to have, for the individual rabbi in the community, a chief rabbi and a Beth Din standing behind over there who are then holding you back? Is there a kind of a tug and a pull, and is that a useful thing in community, that you've got, that sometimes the local rabbi can say, oh, I'd love to do this, but I'm afraid the Beth Din have said no. So you kind of got some cover,
I honestly, Rabbi Shlomo, I honestly don't think there is a yes or no answer to that. And that I genuinely am not equivocating, because we have our own Beth Din, the Spanish Portuguese. I'm the senior rabbi. I'm essentially the chief rabbi of my community, and it's my Beth Din. I've seen the values of having a Beth Din and why that's important. I think that I genuinely believe that these are, and I, with the greatest of the respect to the offices and to the institutions, let this word that I'm about to use not be seen as a diminishing of it. There are tools. They are tools of a community. And with all tools, including AI, by the way, it depends how you use them. They can be used to destroy. They can be used to bring life and success. It depends how they are used. And that makes all the difference. I think it's a mistake, personally, to look at, is the chief rabbi right or not? Is the Beth Din right or not? It can be a terrible encumbering, or it can be something that is used to be able to bring the community forward and to actually give strength to the community. And that's a difference between, the vision and the understanding and the sense of the playing field that we're in as to how it is that we need to be able to run and move forward. I genuinely believe that that's the difference.
Let's just spend a few moments looking back over careers, because both of us at this point of our lives are in transition into a different kind of space, and we'll talk about that in a moment. What do you think, for you, has been both your greatest success and your greatest failure?
While I was here?
Yeah, last 11 years.
Because there could be many things.
In Anglo Jewry.
In Anglo Jewry.
Yeah.
I would say that one of my failures, I'll start with the failures. One of my failures was the ability to read the room. And what I mean by that is to really sense the circumstances on the ground, whether it be in my congregation, my community, greater British Jewry. I have found that when I misread the room, I experienced failures. And what I mean by that is I wasn't sensitive to what was happening in the congregation. What were people feeling? What were people thinking? What were they going through? What was happening in the broader community? What were people thinking, feeling, going through? Very much part of that towards me, right? What they needed from me, what they wanted from me, what they didn't like, and so on. And that comes from, and I'll be very bold and say, hubris. The hubris blinds, right? And at the points in where I look back and say, my goodness, what an arrogant idiot I was in that particular situation, in that circumstance or scenario, which I do, I failed. And that happened in several arenas. I had my mind on what I wanted to do and what I thought needed to be done.
Including the famous lecture.
Yes, included in that. I think that definitely included hubris, because, in that situation, I did not take into account many things. And one of many things. I didn't take into account what was happening on the ground with my rabbinic colleagues at the time. I didn't take into account the relationships that I had with people in various places that this particular lecture would affect, right? I, with that lecture, basically was like a human starting gun. I ended up bringing this issue out to everyone who was connected to me, whether they liked it or not, right? There was an element of that. And that, I think, was a result of both naivete and hubris. So those were failed. And any time that played in my career, I experienced failure. What I'm thankful for is that I've had an opportunity to learn tremendously from those situations. And I hope that I've learned the rich lessons that I've been able to learn in those situations that have helped me, as you say. I think every point along the way is a prep for the next step, and that's been part of the prep. I would say that, I mean, if I had to talk about success, I think, to me, the most cherished aspects of my time here are the relationships. I leave this beautiful community bittersweet. There's a beautiful line there's a poem we read on Rosh Hashanah, Sha'arei Ratzon, and there's a line which is about the Akedah, right? Avraham Avinu bringing Yitzhak up on the Akedah. And there's a beautiful line in the poem that says, Ayin bemar bocha velev sameach. Avraham did so with a bitter eye tearing, but a happy heart. On the one hand, it was his son, and on the other hand, he was meeting the command of God. And I feel that way in my transition. I'm leaving a place that I love and people that I love. And that's sad for me. And I'm going to Yerushalayim and Eretz Israel and living with my family there, which is a dream come true. So it's bittersweet for me. And so the biggest success, I would say, is the beautiful relationships. The relationships with my kehillah and the beautiful people in my kehillah and my community. The relationships with the broader community. The fact that, I'll be able to visit South Hampstead and be able to see friends when I come back. That's a gift. That's not expected. That I can go and come back and know that there are friends here, that there's family here. That really, really means the world to me. So that's a big one. Yeah.
So my failure and so-called success are pretty much intertwined. I mean, I have lots and lots of failures. I could really have done a lot more. But I'm really upset that I have failed to raise the level of literacy in the Ashkenazi community. By literacy, I don't mean being able to read Tolstoy in Hebrew. By literacy, I mean simply being able to read the prayers accurately. I am so jealous of the Sephardi community, where your children grow up reading the words milah b'milah, word by word communally, and they grow up, even if they're not actively engaged or religious, or however you want to define it. But you go to a hotel anywhere in Europe or in Israel, etc., and you go to Shabbat service in a hotel, and the place is filled with Sephardim, and there's not an Ashkenaz there.
Well, there may be one or two.
Yeah, just me. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. And they know the prayers. And over all these years over here, somehow just failed to be able to lift the level of literacy in the community. And if you don't have literacy, you don't have the gateway to any of the whole array of Jewish learning. And that is then linked with the other side of it, because I remember a holy rabbi, a collector, coming here and engaging in conversation. He said to me, so tell me, he said, how many boys, bocharim, do you send to yeshiva a year? And I said, well, I think maybe it might have been 1994, I think. We might have had one. Okay, I'm exaggerating because we've got some beautiful young people. So he said, no, so I suppose, okay, you must have sent girls to seminary. I said, well, no, not really. And he said, well, so what have you done here? What are you hanging around here for? What sort of community are you actually running if you're not growing people and having young people becoming more literate, going to yeshivot, young women becoming more literate and going to yeshivot and being able to engage and teach their own children and all of that. So I said to him, you know, I think that what I might have achieved over here is that the most religious person can sit next to the least religious person, and they both feel comfortable with each other.
Oh, fair.
And
what an achievement that is.
And to me, Joe, to me, that is what Anglo Jewry is missing. That's what is eroding. This middle space that was so unique to the United Synagogue, absolutely unique in the entire world, replicated possibly in South Africa and Australia to an extent, but not in Israel and not in America, where we polarized.
Yeah.
But you could have these broad communities where a person could walk in and not feel that, hey, I'm having a finger pointed at me because I'm secular and all these people are religious. I can walk in over here and I can just feel I'm comfortable here. And I can sit down next to a person, they'll talk to me, and there won't be any sense of discomfort because I sense that there's a hierarchy around over here of the more religious and the less religious, and I'm outside this. So I can't walk into the space over here because I'm not comfortable here. People need to be in their comfort zones in order to be able to come back into a place. Yeah.
Agreed.
And that is something which is absolutely so I'm passionate about this. This is so precious.
Well, it's evident that you're passionate about it.
And we are
in your space.
Yeah.
In your space. Yeah. It's evident that in your shul, it's there. Your passion has poured through the entire space.
And so I think I've learned that the one thing that British Jews, Anglo Jewry hate more than anything else is division.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to be together.
Yeah.
And I know that spreads across even to, you know, embracing reform and Masorti, etc. The people themselves are not different one from the other.
Yeah.
They're not, the person who goes to Masorti shul and the person who goes to an Orthodox shul are not necessarily theologically on different ends of the spectrum. They are the same people.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing that out, because I feel very strongly about that, and I think that I'm thankful that the Sephardim in general still have that. I think that, you know, our community still has what they like to call a broad church, and where there is a feeling that we kind of very, very inclusive, very, very understanding. We don't look at people and point fingers as to whether they're, you know, their religious levels. But I appreciate you saying that even about the broader Jewish community, because what I like to remind people is that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu set a brit with Abraham Avinu, he didn't set a brit with Abraham Avinu and his spiritual heirs. He didn't set a brit with Abraham Avinu and his students. He set a brit with Abraham Avinu and his children.
Yep.
And we are all the children. And on that level, I think it's very important to remember, you know, Rabbi Beryl Wein, alav shalom, who was just recently niftar, tremendous Talmid Chacham, you know, he was commenting on the, you'll remember at the very beginning of the war, there were maybe 300,000 people who went to Washington, D.C. to protest, which for the United States of America is not a big number, right? And the Haredim wouldn't go. And he commented on that. And one of the things, and he was a historian, he was known, you know.
Sure.
And one of the things he said, he goes, we're not in the 19th century anymore with the reform movement. You know, there was a time where we were very nervous about what kind of things they were going to influence and how it was going to influence Rebbe Jewry. We're not in the 19th century anymore. You know, it's not something that we have to be concerned about on that level. And ultimately, there are certain situations in which we have to recognize that if we don't come together and we don't recognize that reality, it's going to come knocking. So I very much appreciate that.
So just to finish off, before we take some questions, tell me what your plans are now. What are your aspirations in this next phase of your life?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be doing some teaching.
No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, so I will, the plan is that I will be leaning heavily into teaching in in probably every mode that I can. So I'm in the middle of writing a book which I want to finish on generally just a framework of Judaism for the modern age. Right? What is it about? What are we doing? And a book that you can just give someone and say, here, read this. This is what we're about. I'm in the middle of that, and I hope to finish it. I haven't been able to because of, Baruch Hashem, the other work. I will be doing a lot more social media content. So I'll be doing, I don't know if anybody follows the parasha, weekly parasha that I do, so that will continue, and that's on video, that'll be on YouTube and various platforms. But I'll be doing a lot more content that way because people are there, our young people are there, and I'm going to be doing a lot more, on that in that way. And I'll be lecturing, so I'll be traveling. I'll come back 3 to 4 times a year to the UK. I'll be in the United States.
And at last, you don't have to be a rabbi, just what you always wanted.
Well, it's funny because I'm leaning into it and saying, okay, I'll do this. But it's interesting because people think rabbi is, community leader. People have asked me, are you still going to be a rabbi? I'm afraid so. But that will be a lot of what it is that I'll be working on. So it'll be a lot of lecturing, scholar in residence, traveling, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And what will you be doing, Rav?
On a very, very different track. I think that as a Jew, we have a responsibility to try and help improve civil society. And I think that in the absence of that magnificent voice of Jonathan Sacks, there is a tremendous empty space. I don't think there's anybody who can fill his shoes, but I think that as Jews we need to be talking to the society in which we live and contributing our values to it in any way that we can in order to be able to create a better and healthier civil society, which will then impact upon their attitudes towards us as Jews and will impact as well upon their positive attitudes towards Israel. That is the far objective of it, but the immediate objective is simply to be able to find ways to share our values with ordinary people in this country to make their lives better, more worthwhile, more meaningful within the context of their lives. This is not about preaching Judaism. It's probably about preaching Judeo-Christian values and trying to help people to understand just the power of those values and their eternal relevance in times of enormous change. So I think that it's really about focusing outside Jewish community for me rather than inside.
Yeah. It's very much needed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your patience, everybody. Would you like to ask any questions? Let's go.
First, a very serious question, then a more trivial one. How come the two formal rabbis, who I always see in formal attire, both chose to wear pullovers?
I'll tell you why. Because I sent a WhatsApp to Joseph a little earlier this evening, and I said to him, "Would you like to, come dressed in a suit and tie?" He said, "Well, can we do jumpers?" I said, "Yes, we can do jumpers because I'd like this to be an informal conversation between friends because we are genuinely friends." And so we came dressed in mufti. Yeah. Was that your serious question?
Yeah.
Okay.
You haven't mentioned the importance, or I think it's important, of your wives and families in your careers. I know that Rabbi Dweck had a wife who came from a rabbinical family, and I know that you had a rabbi who did not come from a rabbinical family. And did they both willingly choose the same path and career as you both respectively did? Did they both approve of the way you conducted your lives and careers?
I can answer that immediately for Lindy and for me. We traveled together in our journey in Judaism, right from the very beginning. We became observant together. And so when we came into this, we came into it together. And although the one is up in the pulpit every Shabbat and the other one is more absent, Lindy has played as large a part in the growth of this community over the last 40 years as I have, if not larger, in her own quiet way, in all the conversations, etc., and the immense amount that she's done to be able to raise the bar for women's participation in learning and in participation in service. So we have journeyed together from the beginning all the way through.
Mm.
Yeah.
I wish I could say the same, but it's not true. I don't wish that I could say the same. Our stories are all unique. Margalit, I wouldn't say that she went willingly into the work, but I would say completely that she gave 100% support in all of the work. So not just in the support of me in what it was that I was doing, but in all of the structure and support in the sense of moral support that was necessary to be able to do it throughout the last 25 years. If she was not there, Margalit believed in her core that what we were doing was what we needed to do, even if she didn't love the fact that we had to do it or that we were doing it. That's the truth. That's the truth. But Margalit she was the one, she simply sees things that I don't see. And she recognized, even in our time here, things that weren't happening in the community that needed to happen. She did them and she implemented them.
And you
so
see,
that is the way that she.
You see, you can't do it without the support of a life partner.
Yeah.
Because communal life is extraordinarily, totally demanding, completely demanding, and it's demanding to the point where sometimes it is in direct conflict with family. And if you did not have the support of your life mate,
you can't do it.
You can't do it. It will fall apart.
Yeah.
Those times when you've sacrificed family for community could only be done if your wife is alongside with you.
Which are many
and there are
times.
many times.
Yeah, many.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't suggest that we're the most demanding of all professions, but it is nevertheless a demanding profession, and it is sometimes an unforgiving one. When the person comes to you in crisis and wants your help, you can't turn around and say, "I'm so sorry, I can't be there for you because."
That's right.
Because they won't hear that.
Right.
And it'll always be held against you, and there's no forgiveness.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's just the way it is, because in that moment, for them, it's about me.
Yeah.
I need you.
Yeah. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I do. I understand you've made the aliyah to Israel. What do you think about the division between the Sephardim and the non-Sephardim, the religious,
Mm-hmm.
and the sort of, I'll use the word, hansacha,
Mm-hmm.
of the Sephardim being like a separate,
Mm-hmm.
in a party, in a political party,
Yeah.
of Shas.
Yeah.
Is that something you identify with? What is your opinion with regard to that?
My opinion on that is I think that that's changing drastically in Israel currently, because I've watched it over the last 30 years consciously, and it has changed massively over 30 years. The children of the individuals who held very stark lines between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim just do not recognize those lines anymore. They can't be bothered. And that is, in my opinion, there may be obviously some institutionalized prejudices that might be kind of trickled down, but it is in no way as serious and severe as it was, back then. What I am worried about are other divisions in Israel, and mainly between the religious and non-religious, or the religious and the chilonim. So one of the things that I didn't say when you asked me about what I'm going to do, I intend very much to engage with the chilonim in Israel as best I can, and to engage with them in Torah, because I'm sure that you've experienced this, Rav. Since October 7th, I have received many, many people from around the world contacting me saying, Rabbi Dweck, I've seen your stuff. I'm not religious. I didn't grow up religious, but I want to come back to some Torah, to my Masorah, to my roots. How do I do that? And the problem is that in Eretz Israel today, which is, it's terribly worrying and upsetting, is that there is such a strong divide between the religious world and the non-religious that there's no connections. And I would like to be able to lend some support in that space, if I can, but I think that that's the divide that I'm more worried about than the Sephardi Ashkenazi divide. That's correct. That is true.
And there's another question behind over there. Someone else had their hand up.
Thank you very much. My question actually is somewhat connected to your response there, Rabbi Dweck. It's really the issue and the challenge, I think, facing us as Jews outside of Israel as much as it is in Israel today, around the centrality of Israel and the issue of anti-Semitism, and how that interacts, how you see the future in relation to Israel, anti-Semitism, and our Judaism.
Just before Rabbi Dweck answers that question, I just want to say that before the session tonight, when we chatted downstairs, we had a conversation about a generation of young Jewish people in this country who have become alienated from Israel, and our sense of responsibility at this stage of our careers, that we should be doing something about that. And if you're talking about anti-Semitism in Israel, we should be talking about that cohort of this community who are slipping away from us attitudinally and emotionally. And it's happened, as we agreed, on our watch. And therefore we bear some responsibility for that. And so we're chatting about the kinds of things that we can implement as a program.
The reason why I raised the question is because I think that they're both threats and opportunities. And I was just really interested in how you saw that intersection.
Yeah. I believe that we are, as a people, inextricably tied to the land. I don't think we can get out of that. As much as we might want to, we can't get out of that. And what's important is to be able to present that without the political weight that we see on a regular basis. It needs to be parked and then seen only in the light of what the land means to the people as a people. I think one of the big things that we make a mistake with is that we think of ourselves first as a religion. And that's a terrible mistake. A terrible mistake. We are first a nation, and then everything else. And there are religious parts to our nation which are very important. There's no question about it. But we are first and foremost a nation. I tell this story, and so you might have heard me tell this story, but just to support it. One of the things that I've done, that I do is that I'm a president of the Council of Christians and Jews. And I was sitting with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Cardinal of the Catholic Church, talking about, of all things, Israel, which is not an easy conversation to have with those two gentlemen. And the Cardinal said, Rabbi Dweck, I understand, we love the Jewish people, and of course they're the mother religion, but do you really need your own land? Which I heard as an anti-Semitic comment. I didn't take well to it. So I said to him, well, Cardinal, I would imagine you've read the Bible. And if you have read the Bible, you will know that before we were a religion, we were a nation. And that is the land upon which we exist and have existed as a nation. Thankfully, the Archbishop said, he's right, Cardinal. So I had a little bit of support from the Anglicans. But so to me, it's that understanding, it's that lesson, and that needs to be taught to everybody. It needs to be taught to every Jewish person. And in that frame, the politics can then be dealt with and looked at. But I think if that's not taught, if we keep thinking of ourselves as a religion, then of course the question will always be, well, how do we feel about Israel? And, do we need to be connected that way? And so on. It's not a relevant question when one thinks of oneself as a nation and recognizes that is the homeland. Like I said,
Yes,
no
of
matter
course,
how far you dig in that land,
The issue, of course,
everything that you find has our name written all over it. And
the issue, of course, is that we have existed without a land, not as a nation, for 2,000 years, and so we've existed as a religion.
I disagree with that, Rav.
Okay.
I disagree. We've existed as expats.
Okay, that's for our first podcast.
Well, I look forward.
Okay.
We're going to go toe to toe. I would like to say, I don't know if anybody's seen, I put this up on my Instagram story today because I was appalled to see it, and I'm not sure what is going on with it. I say that openly. But the British Museum had an exhibit of the ancient kingdom of Judah and Israel, and it's been removed. And just disappeared. Just disappeared. So that worries me. But anyway, yeah.
We've got another 5 minutes, so just another couple of questions.
I have a question of, you're talking about how important it is to be connected to Israel, but there's such a lack of education of the Hebrew language in Jewry.
Yes.
And I believe this is really massive that no children are ever taught in a Jewish school modern Hebrew. What do you think about
I could not agree with you more. I think it is a terrible, terrible, terrible situation in British Jewry that children who go to Jewish day school, for some of them 12 years of their lives, come out with not even rudimentary Hebrew. And if you compare them to kids in the United States and in other countries, they are at the bottom. And it is a terrible crime that we are doing that, or that is the situation here. Because like the Rav was saying, they can't even begin to get into their heritage and their learning and their wisdom tradition, their Torah, if they don't have it. So we are failing the children in that regard. I believe that very, very strongly. I also will say, however, having been a headmaster of a school, it's not an easy thing to fix. Because first of all, one of the hardest things to fix in a school is to change curriculum, that fundamentally, because you have to move mountains in order to be able to do it. And this specifically is difficult because you cannot simply hire teachers to do it, because who's going to do it? You don't have teachers who can speak Hebrew. So you need teachers to speak Hebrew in order to be able to teach children to speak Hebrew. And the only way that you could really do that well is to bring teachers from Israel to be able to teach the kids, which is a massive problem. And the problem is several levels. One is just bringing the teachers in is an obstacle. Bringing the teachers in and settling them is an obstacle. Getting them to acclimate to the culture shock of being here and what the nature of the culture of the families and the students is a problem. And when all of that works, they go into the class and start speaking broken English because they don't feel that the students understand them. So it's really, I will say, in my school we did teach Ivrit be'Ivrit. We taught all of the Limudei Kodesh in Hebrew and immersed them in Hebrew from 2 years old. It was the hardest thing for me as a headmaster to maintain in the school. So I say a strong criticism, but I caveat that with it is not an easy thing to fix. But I really do believe that it needs to be made better significantly. We're failing them.
Let's take one last question.
Thank you both. You both mentioned earlier how two of the greatest rabbis of the 20th century informed your lives, the Lubavitcher Rebbe and Rabbi Joseph. What lessons in leadership did you take from them that you have implemented yourself in your roles in this country?
You start.
I'll quote Jonathan Sachs. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was a different kind of leader because he was a leader who created leaders. And if you want to be a leader, you have to create other leaders. So the lesson I take from him is to be able to enable and validate and give space to every single person with whom you come into contact to be able to grow and to become the best person that they can become and to become their own leader. And not to try and be their leader, but let them be a leader for others as well. I'm trying to visualize this extraordinary Lubavitcher movement around the world of thousands and thousands and thousands of these who will all be gathered around this coming week for the Kinus Hashluchim. And this could not have happened if there'd been a style of leadership which said, I'm a leader and you all have to be followers. He created lots of leaders, and I think that's what one always needs to try to do.
Yeah. For me, Rav Ovadia Zatzal was a specialist. He was a specialist in halakha. I mean, I believe he was one of the greatest halachic minds of the last 200 years. And one of the pitfalls of studying Jewish law from the books is that one can run the risk of never getting out of the book. What I mean by that is you might know what is permitted and prohibited, but you don't necessarily know how to run that in the community, in society, with the Jewish people. And what I merited being able to see on a daily basis was this man who had encyclopedic knowledge of the law, but had this deep humanity and deep love for the people that he served. And he genuinely believed that he served. So, there's something about that in common. But I was able to see the living of the law in his behavior with people. And it didn't matter to him whether he was speaking to the prime minister or he was speaking to the carpenter who was fixing his cabinet. I watched him speak to both. He was at one in all of those situations and engaged as a living, loving person in all of those situations. And if I had not had the merit of being able to watch that in real time over years, I think that I would have run the same risk of, this is what it says, as opposed to, what is it that we do? And it's funny because my wife, she grew up with that, and somebody asked her about, how women in her family wore skirts or something like that. And I was eavesdropping on the phone call, and she said, do you want to know what it says or what we did? I said, wow, that encapsulates it in a thing. So,
I just want to come back on this in terms of the, how you enable people. I think one of the things which was very fundamental around over here from the outset was we had, and we've always had a policy, hashkafa, an outlook. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Until we have found really strong reasons why it has to be no. You want to do something, you've come up with an idea, the answer is yes. Do it. Make it happen. You've got a good idea. It sounds a bit wild. Okay, let's see if we can make it work. And this was a kind of fundamental change to the kind of stuff which was always happening in the United Synagogue, where the answer was no. The answer is no. You've got a board or a committee of this. So when you say yes to people, you give them wings to fly. You allow them to flourish, to be able to become leaders. And it all starts with just one word, yes, not no. And I think that's what I learned from the Rebbe. Naftali, you had your hand up. Let's end with you because you were anxious to ask a question.
Actually, more of an observation, having observed you both tangentially from an angle of 30 degrees, quite a long time. It strikes me that you both have an extraordinary gift for reading the room and aligning it to the moment. And I see the process percolating inside you as you sit here, you Shlomo and you Joe at the other place, and having achieved that synthesis, you are then able to relate it to the universal, and by doing so, to elevate the situation and to elevate the individuals so that they leave the place with a lighter step. And that this is an extraordinary gift. And if what I would ask with both of you is to bottle it and pass it on to your successors, because it is so needed. I mean, never have we been so aware, as in the last 2 years, as to how much it is needed, nor have we been aware as to how rare it is until we have the Prime Minister standing here a few weeks ago and demonstrating his inability to do either.
Well, you see,
Especially, so in this aspect of reading the room, what you've shown is the way that leadership arises out of service. The first
Joe, so I just want you to know that we have a style around over here. We always choose one of our congregants, preferably somebody who's connected on both sides. We pay them a fortune of money to say nice things to end the evening. Thank you, Naftali.
Well, I'm glad it was Naftali.
Thank you all so much. I hope that was of some interest to you. We're very anxious that the two of us sitting over here talking about ourselves and about our lives would be a bit of navel gazing of no interest to anybody else. So thank you so much just for sitting there and listening.